Hi, I'm Kay Witt. Thank you for joining me today for another exciting art project. Grab a cup of coffee, a pencil, and a piece of paper for taking notes, and let's get started. I've transferred my wolf to a gray sheet of velour paper, and I have outlined it with my 9B graphite pencil. And now I'm using my 6B charcoal pencil to go over some areas and darken them to make sure they don't get lost with subsequent layers of pastel. The charcoal pencil will show through all of those additional layers that we're going to add to this beautiful wolf. So I'm going to put in some of the dark hairs in the ear and mark where the ear hole is on the wolf. I take my time when I do this. I can't stress that enough. If you have studied with me or watched some of my other video workshops, you know that I really emphasize spending time with your drawing, getting to know your subject. It's very important. I've also gone ahead and put in some of the white lines that I want to mark on the wolf. You can see them with my white charcoal pencil. You can do that before you add the dark charcoal, the black charcoal, or afterwards. I'd done them earlier in this work when I transferred my drawing and emphasized it went over it again with graphite pencil. I added the white charcoal pencil then to mark the white, some of the white hairs over the eye and on the edge of the wolf's fur, and also the highlights on the nose and on the rim of the eyes. It's very important to have a good drawing before you start painting. If your drawing is good, then your painting has a much higher chance of being successful. If your drawing is not good, then it's going to be hard to correct that as you go along. The drawing is the skeleton, just like we have a skeleton, and it is the backbone of your painting. So take the time to make sure you have an accurate, strong drawing in whatever it is you are painting. I'm going to speed things up a little bit while I put in my charcoal lines. I'm going to carefully outline the eye making sure I get the shape right. I'm going to mark the pupil. You can see I've already marked the highlight in the iris of the eye for later. We're going to strengthen that as we paint it. And now I'm working on the other side. This is part of the mask of the wolf. This is a gray wolf as opposed to a black-faced wolf or red wolf. And so they have a black mask that goes around their eyes and across the center of their noses. I'll carefully outline that other eye. I'm working on the mouth now, taking care to make sure it's accurate, drawing in the corners of the mouth. I'm working my way around, getting that dark area of those lips. These are all very important shapes. Outlining the nose. And drawing in where the nostrils are located as well. We'll need to know that information later. If we don't do it now, it's going to be very hard to find the nose after we put on those initial layers. I'm using my white charcoal pencil to add a few more white lines. So I'm putting some white lines under the eye. And on the rim of the eyelid. And these are markers that are going to help us find our way. I'm also putting a rim around the bottom of the mouth so I can find it. I'm correcting the shape of my mouth now with my 9B pencil. And a kneaded eraser. So I didn't like the way that looked, so I'm adding some correction to it. I'm marking the highlight in the eye. And I'm drawing some nice bright white hairs in the inside of the ear, being careful to go in the direction that the hair grows. And this marks the outside edges of the wolf's face, which will also help us when we go to paint those areas. I've sped things up a little bit for you, and I'm adding white hairs inside the left ear now and behind the ear. Now when you're adding these white hairs, you can't cover them up, so make sure you don't use a super heavy pressure when you're using your white charcoal pencil, and be very accurate with your placement of hairs with the white charcoal pencil, because they're very hard, if not impossible, to get rid of. So now I'm marking that outside. This is going to be the top of the back of the wolf, and marking the highlights on the nostrils and edges there, and also around the mouth under the chin. Now we're going to start with the base layers. So I'm putting down a coat of 707.7 medium gray. You can see those white hairs are coming right through, which is great. So we want to put a base layer on our painting, and then we're going to add other colors on top of that. But this is going to help us have a nice smooth appearance. You want to use light pressure. I'm using the round end of a half stick of Rembrandt pastel. You can use the side of the stick that's been sanded flat, whatever works best for you. The little round side enables me to get into smaller places, like around the eyes. Note, I am not coloring in the eyeball, and I will do that later. We'll color the eyes. But right now I'm just carefully cross-hatching back and forth, different directions. Don't use your pastel in circles. It's going to make lines on your picture that you're not going to like. Here I've added a sheet of glassine to cover up my wolf, something to rest my hand on. Glassine is wonderful. It doesn't, pastel doesn't stick to it, so it won't smudge your painting. And it protects it. And you can use a piece of it over and over again. So I'm carefully going around the eye. I'm working on the top of the nose and around the nose. I switched pastels, but it's the same color. I always have more than one. This one has a nice sanded edge, so I can use the flat edge, covering the rest of the fur that's on the wolf. Do not press hard. Remember to use a light pressure when doing this. We're going to add more layers, so it's going to get smoother. And at this point, we don't have to worry too much about going into the background, because we're going to add the background later and it will cover up any uneven areas. But as you can see, we can see the white hairs that we put in with the charcoal pencil quite easily. The next color I'm going to add is the 411.3 Burnt Sienna pastel. I'm using it on the end to add brown into the fur. Now here you see I've added too much color. I didn't wipe it off. So I can spritz that away with my camera blower, which is great. So we got rid of that excess pastel, and now I can add a more even coat of brown pastel to the ear. So that's a good thing to know. Be sure and get yourself a camera blower to get rid of excess pastel. So I'm going to add some brown to the other ears. For right now, we're going to work on these ears, and this will show you the process we're going to use for the entire wolf. Again, I'm using very light pressure. I'm going to place some brown on the side of the face. And around the eyes. A gray wolf has a combination of about 3 or 4 different colors in its coat. It has the gray, it has brown, it has cream color as well. They're very beautiful. I'm adding brown now around the right eye of the wolf and on the edges of his fur, on the side of his face. I'm also adding brown over the top of the nose. And I am using the short round end. I'm going down around underneath his mouth and the fur that's there. Now I'm going to switch to, it's the same color, but it's another piece of pastel that has a side sanded so that I can add larger areas of brown pastel a little bit easier. And I've also sped this up just a little bit. And now I'm going to add dark gray, 704.3, into the darkest areas of the ear of the wolf. We're building up the darks so that the lights will show up. And so I've covered up the face of my wolf with my paper, my glassine paper, and I'm adding dark gray into the center of the wolf's ear. I'm going to paint both ears at the same time. So what I did to the left ear, I'm going to do to the right ear. And I'm going to add a little bit of dark gray also around the eye, the mask that I talked about earlier. And I'm using the end of a stick that's been sanded nice and smooth and wiped off. We don't want that excess dust like you saw before when I used the brown. add the dark gray on the other side of the wolf's face. And again, I'm using a very, very light layer. Continuing to add dark gray. Very lightly. And we're going to go over the entire forehead of the wolf. And I'm using my pastel to go in the direction that the fur grows. I'm rubbing it in a little bit with my finger. I'm going under his nose on the top of his mouth where it's darker. Now I'm using some 538.3 Mars Violet to darken the brown a little bit more. Mars Violet is a wonderful color. It has a slight purpley tint to it. It makes the brown very dark. So I'm using it in the shadow colors underneath the wolf's face, down in the neck area. Under his chin and mouth. Here I'm using the dark gray 704.3 to add some darker areas over the 538.3 Mars Violet under the neck and in the deeper areas of the fur. Now we move on to the eyes. We're going to outline the eyes with 305 Spruce Blue, NuPastel. Very sharp point on there. We're going to use blue underneath the black because it makes the color of black a bit richer when we have the blue underneath. So I'm going to outline both eyes with the 305 Spruce Blue. I'm putting in a little highlight that I missed earlier with my white charcoal pencil. And continuing to add the spruce blue. And now I'm going over the spruce blue with 229 black NuPastel. I'm putting in the pupil with the 229. I don't like the shape I made. It's not accurate. So I'm going to use my kneaded eraser to take some color off. Putting in 229 on the bright eye. I'm doing this very carefully. And adding the pupil. Now I'm base coating the eye in 308 Palm Green. I'm going to give these eyes a greeny brown color. And now I'm using 353 Cordovan to add the shadow at the top 1/3 of the iris. Put that shadow of the lid. And here I'm correcting the shape. I don't like the shape, so I'm going to use my charcoal pencil to accurately correct that before I go on with the painting. I'm also shaping up those pupils a little bit more. Now I'm using 263 Indian Red to add a reddish brown color as we're moving down into the iris of the eye. I'm going to add another light color, another green. This is 268 Light Sap Green. So I'm coloring the bottom third of the iris very lightly with the sap green. And we're going to use the Endive Green 348 NuPastel to add a very bright secondary highlight area at the bottom of the iris. Now I need my shadow under my eye to be darker, also my pupil, but I'm going to use that black to darken up the area underneath the lid of the eye. This really gives dimension to your eye. A lot of people just forget to do this. I'm going to add a highlight on the outside edge of that eye and down in the corners of the eye. It makes the eye look moist. We're going to reinforce the highlights that are on the rim with our white charcoal pencil. And now I'm using 299 Light Gray on that bottom area for the secondary highlight. A little more Indian Red. I'm really liking the way this looks. So you can go back and forth with these colors until you get just the look that you want with your eyes. This is the Endive. Pushing a little bit harder now to make that a little bit brighter. Now this is 211 White. I'm adding the final bright highlight. You'll notice that our secondary light falls directly opposite our bright highlight. That looks beautiful. Let's move on now and paint our nose. So we're going to outline it with spruce blue, and we're going to color in the nose with the spruce blue. We're going to color the nostrils very dark with the spruce blue. And we're going to color all over the shadow area and the bottom of the nose with the spruce blue. And the highlights that we put in earlier with the white charcoal pencil are going to show through. So I'm using a lighter touch on the rest of the nose. Then I'm going to use the 229 black to color in those nostrils. I moved the paper up a little bit so you can see that nose better. And now I'm covering the shadow areas with a light application of the black. This is 314 Old Lilac. On the left side of the nose and also on the bottom of the nostril. And this I'm using now is 235 light blue that I'm using on the right side of the nose and the bottom of that nostril. And then our 211 white over the 235 blue to add the brightest light on the nose. I'm using a little more spruce blue and a little more black. The highlight was a little strong. Now I'm reshaping the nose leather and coloring in that mouth with the 229 black. Adding a little bit more 314 Old Lilac. I hope you've enjoyed part 1 of this video workshop. Join me for part 2 of The Glorious Wolf.